Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Austin Price and Rob Lewis. I'm Brent Hubbs. Podcast presented, as always, by our friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Remember, it's a great time to make sure everything's running right as you bounce back and forth between heat and air conditioning. Most people are on the air conditioned life now. Some of us are still bouncing back and forth between the two. But you want to, if you got an issue, you want to call Blue Water Climate Control because they're going to do things the right way. They're going to come out and get it repaired with what you need. They're going to get it right the first time. Great service. You can read all the reviews about their service on their website. And again, they've got a discount for Volquest.com subscribers for all of the support that you guys have given Blue Water Climate Control in the year plus that they've been a part of sponsoring the podcast here for us at Volquest.com. Give them a call at 865-299-2290, or you can visit them online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com. Book your appointment. Find out more about Blue Water Climate Control at their website. All right, guys, plenty to get into in this podcast, even though we're heading into, quote, a slower time period here. Final exams taking place with players and recruiting getting ready to get cranked up on June the 1st, but other things to talk about. Let's first dive into a little bit of the NFL draft. Just your guys' reaction to the draft. I don't think it's any surprise the SEC led the way in draft picks, starting first with Tennessee. For both of you, I mean, how surprised were you? Was it a bigger surprise to you that Josh Palmer was taken first, or a bigger surprise that there was such a gap of space between when Palmer was chosen and where Trey Smith was chosen? I think it's pretty obvious, probably the answer there, but just your thoughts on Tennessee and the draft. Rob, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I'll start with Josh. I thought, I guess the way I would describe it is he was a third-round pick in the NFL in spite of the Tennessee program he played for instead of despite that program. I mean, the kid had 450 yards receiving last year, ends up as a third-round draft pick almost – entirely, I think, because of what people saw from him in the Senior Bowl. I mean, he didn't get any help from picking Tennessee out of high school and getting to the league. And I think that's a reflection of what's been wrong with this program over the year. I mean, not getting top end talent on the front end and then not developing the talent that you do have. And, it's like, I mean, it's a cliche, but I mean, the NFL draft is a reflection of kind of the health of your program from a talent standpoint. I mean, just look, Alabama 10 picks, Ohio State 10 picks, Georgia 9 picks. It's just you can't win in this league if you don't have guys that are going to play on Sunday. And I'm happy for Josh and with Trey. I'm a little surprised, but I'm not shocked that people didn't want to take that risk. But I will say, if he ends up, being able to stay healthy and stay on the field, I'll be stunned if he's not the steal of the entire draft.
See, I agree. For me, and Trey sent me a nice text message on Sunday. I told him, I said, Trey, I would much rather have went in the 6th round to Kansas City than the 3rd round to some, half decent franchise. I mean, Kansas City set up, with a franchise quarterback, with franchise playmakers. And Brent, when you factor in the Super Bowl, they couldn't protect Patrick Mahomes. Now they went out and done some things to shore up their offensive line, but then they add him late in the draft. I think this is a great place and a great landing spot for him. Just when you look at the overall kind of arc of everything. Like, again, if I'm him, I'm disappointed I fell, but at the same time, pretty happy with where I ended up, and probably happier that I ended up falling there than getting drafted higher somewhere.
It's not like middle of the road. Not like you went the 6th round to the Jets.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And I think everybody in the NFL obviously had him redlined, and understandably, because of everything he went through medically at Tennessee, and that's why he fell. I don't think anybody in an evaluation in the NFL wrote up, this guy's a 6th round pick at best. I think it's just because of the medical stuff and the fact that he couldn't go visit with individual franchises probably hurt him in terms of getting some of those medical answers that those franchises needed. We saw Adam Schefter talk about that. So I'm with you guys. I think he's landed at a good spot. I think he's got the talent to make that team. There'll be competition there. But if he's healthy and can practice, every day, I think that's going to be the big challenge is, can he practice every day? Because he's going to need to practice every day if he's going to go win a roster spot, have a chance to be, on the field and playing significant snaps for that franchise, he's got to be able to practice even more than he did this past year. We know he practiced more this past year than he did the previous year. As for Palmer, I think, Austin, you pointed this out, and I guess my biggest surprise with him being drafted where he was, and I know that, there were several other teams that liked him. I mean, he was going to go in the third round somewhere, because that's what I think there were multiple teams that said, hey, if he's there in the third round, we want to take him. But the fact that he didn't play special teams at Tennessee, Austin, makes it a little bit surprising to me that that multiple teams really liked him as much as they did, because I guess he could learn to play teams in the NFL. But he wasn't a kick returner. He wasn't a punt returner. He didn't do anything on teams at Tennessee, which, if you're not going to be a number 1 or number 2 receiver, which you don't think he's going to be with the Chargers out of the gate, it's a little surprising to me that he went that high without that on his resume.
Well, when you look at kind of the flash, I mean, he flashed a lot in his short time here. You go back to even 2 years ago at Georgia, he had the 2 touchdown catches. There's, and 2 big plays down there on those deep balls. Of course, back then he was wearing a different number, wearing a number in the 80s. And then he switched to 5, and just, I mean, I'll give, the previous, 2 staffs ago, Bob Welton and them saw something in Josh Palmer, Zach Azani. They saw something in this kid, kind of a late bloomer, coming out of Canada down to St. Thomas Aquinas. And he just got better and better over his college career. And again, much like Trey, goes to a spot, he's a receiver, and he's going to catch balls from a quarterback that's going to be in the second year that had a dynamite freshman rookie year in the NFL last year, and Justin Herbert. I mean, that again, you start factoring in where these guys land. He's not going to Philly to catch balls from Jalen Hurts, who's still going to look to run it more than he throws it. He's not going to Baltimore, where Lamar Jackson, he still runs it as much as he throws it. He's going to a place that they will throw it all over the lot, and they need receivers. And Keenan Allen's getting a little bit older, and Mike Williams has not been exactly perfect coming out of Clemson, like that franchise probably hoped he would, several years ago. So he's going to have a shot there, because they don't necessarily have an alpha 1 or 2. They've got, to me, Josh Palmer is exactly where Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were as far as that same level. I don't think any of them are just alpha 1s. So they're just really good, solid players.
I would say, how much do you think Josh was helped by the fact that, due to the quarterback play the past couple of years, he probably has many contested catches on film as anybody in the country?
Yeah. Well, you go back, Brent, and this was the one thing that I know that was on one, and you heard him say it when they put the phone call out with Josh Palmer, between the GM and the head coach and Palmer, when they told him they were drafting him. But it was something I heard everybody talked about going into the draft. When you put on the film of Josh Palmer, what kind of games did he have against some of the better corners that got drafted? J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Tyson Campbell. He had bigger plays in those games against Alabama, South Carolina, and Georgia.
There are plays on film from last year where he got behind Surtain and Campbell for touchdowns. And, I mean, Tennessee, obviously wasn't in those games, but those are two clips that not a lot of receivers had, even in this league.
No doubt. I mean, and there were a lot of people because of that, particularly, Horn and Surtain, those two guys who obviously went high in the draft. There were NFL people, who said, he's an NFL wide receiver. He's gonna make it, even though his quarterback hasn't helped him enough, but he's going to be an NFL wide receiver, and he certainly was. Rob, I know you've got a piece coming out about Tennessee in the draft overall. When you look at it, obviously 2017, you got Derek Barnett in the first round, Alvin Kamara in the third round, Cam Sutton in the third round. That's those guys are doing all right. But when you look at the overall number of guys drafted, that is a telling sign, as you said earlier, about kind of what Josh Heupel has inherited and where Tennessee is at this point in time, and the rebuild that's in front of them, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, you go back to, when Eric Berry and Dan Williams both went in the first round in what would that would have been the 2010 draft.
Yep.
Since then, you had Cordero go off a bad team as one of the last picks in the first round, and then since Cordero and what was that was the 2013 draft, I think.
Yep.
You've had Juwan James and Derek Barnett in the last 6 years, and as first round picks. I mean, Alvin was obviously a first round talent, but I mean, not a first round pick, but first round talent in hindsight. So I mean, two first round picks as an SEC program in the last 6 years. I mean, that just, again, I mean, you're not going to compete at the top of the league when that's the case. Yeah. And 4 picks in the last 2 years total.
Yeah.
4 total.
Whereas Kentucky had 6 this year themselves.
And Missouri had 5, didn't they? They had at least 4. I think they had 5. Yeah, Missouri had 5. Yeah, Kentucky had 6. And just that shows you just exactly what you said, Hubbard, what Heupel is walking into.
Yep, it certainly does. And because of that, Austin, we're seeing Tennessee active in the transfer portal. It's been busy for the Volunteers. Obviously, Joe Milton, everybody knew that was coming, but Tennessee active on the defensive side with 2 pickups and who knows, maybe more coming. It certainly feels like Tennessee they're not taking guys just to take guys, but if there are guys out there that they think that can help them and make an impact, it seems like Josh Heupel is okay with going after guys and not necessarily getting, caught up in worrying about a bunch of numbers and all that stuff that I've kind of suggested, with self-imposed stuff and everything else. The self-imposed penalty is more on the 85 than it is on initials traditionally. But it seems like Tennessee has been aggressive and will continue to be somewhat aggressive with guys they like in the portal, doesn't it?
Well, I think you have to be aggressive because, again, the schedule sets up for you this year to where if you can overachieve, find a way to overachieve, because nobody's expecting anything out of this program. I mean, like, they are the total underdogs, flying under the radar program. So if they can find a way to overachieve expectations, which are set very, very low, then you establish something with recruits going forward, in my opinion. So I would be aggressive, and try to get some guys that can help you. They felt like Caleb Tremblay can help them. He's coming in here. They feel like Jawan Mitchell can help them. He's coming in here. And then, of course, that's not to say that they don't feel like they have any quarterbacks in the room, because that would be inaccurate. But do they feel like they've got a locked-in starter? No, they don't. So you bring in Joe Milton as well. And I mentioned this in the chat. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see if Tennessee would go on a guy like Javonte Payton from Nashville, ties to the state. He about came here out of high school, then had to go JUCO, then about came out here out of JUCO, and just ended up going to Mississippi State. So third time's the charm, maybe, Brent. I mean, this does have someone on the roster currently who committed to Derek Dooley, and that was 4 coaches ago. Seriously,
is that legit?
Is Darrell Middleton not the greatest story? He committed to Derek Dooley's staff. That was when he was a freshman in high school. That was Dooley's last year. Since then, we've had 5 years of Butch, 3 years of Pruitt, and because he had the road less travel going JUCO and winding in and around, and having an extra COVID year, he's still on the roster for Josh Heupel. Let that resonate, people. Derek Dooley has been gone here nearly a decade, and someone who committed to him, now granted, he committed when he was a freshman in high school, is still on this roster. Because I remember where I was. I was walking through the Target when I got a call and said, Darrell Middleton's committing. And I did the interview with the kid, recorded it on my wife's phone, walking around the closed section of Target at Turkey Creek.
Hey, AP, that story reminds me. Have you got anything on Gerald Williams in that 6th year?
I honestly think the Darrell Middleton story is more fascinating than the Gerald Williams Fork Union to San Francisco Community College.
It is, but there haven't been as many questions about Gerald Williams as there were, or about Darrell Middleton as there were about Gerald Williams over the course of that journey.
Yeah, the biggest
No,
question now is Middleton going to be a part of the Josh Heupel program or not? And we'll have to see what happens with him moving forward. Austin, you've opened up a pretty interesting quick topic. I'm going to just have some fun with before we dive back into a couple other football things. All right, so you did an interview at Target with Darrell Middleton, a commitment interview there for a story. Rob, where's the best commitment interview you did?
Oh,
Most
man.
random place.
Driving back from the beach with the wife and 2 young children, and pulling into and not like in downtown anywhere, still like in that, that kind of nebulous zone where there aren't any interstates. You're just going through a bunch of small towns and red lights, and doing it in the parking lot of a ribeyes steakhouse in far eastern North Carolina. Thanks, Devontae Gaines.
Devontae Gaines is the one who did it. Austin, is Target your best? Is that your best place you've done one?
Probably not. But to be honest with you, like there's been numerous times where I have got a kid on the phone, asked him a question that I knew he would have to be long-winded on, called Jesse or Brent or whoever and said, record this. And I flip back over, the kid's still rambling about whatever the hell he's talking about. And then I just go into the interview, and, whoever, recorded, because like, again, like, it's like, if you haven't noticed, like, like with Jawan Mitchell, like it had mine and Ben's name on it. Cause I got Jawan on the phone, and then Ben wrote it, so like that happens a lot. So there are other times. I mean, I can't think it off the top of my head. The one I'll never forget is the one you all. I was at Riverstone Resort and Spa in Pigeon Forge, and did the Tyler Bray deal, and then he announced during media day, and getting the messages from you guys saying everybody just was crushed when they got the little notification on their phone in the media center, like that. Those little things.
I got a manual negative in the parking lot of a Food Line while also on vacation.
Manual negative. I did Luke Stocker at a Kay's Ice Cream in Jefferson City, leaving on my way home from.
I remember that one drove us crazy because we knew he had committed, and then we couldn't get him on the phone for like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, I got him while I was feeding a young. I mean, my deal was to my son. Hey, I think my son was born at that point, but I had some smaller, maybe my nephew with me. I'm like, hey, eat this ice cream because I got to talk to this kid for a few minutes. So I threw some ice cream at a kid to do that one.
This is not a commitment one, but there was the who was the kid out of Memphis that like went to Duke? It wasn't Elliot Williams. It was another or North Carolina. It was somebody from
Leslie. What was Leslie's last name?
Either way, Rob said, I can't get this kid on the phone, AP. Can you get this kid on the phone? I'll get you Ruth's Chris if you get this kid on the phone. So I just messaged the kid, hey, look, my buddy says he'll get me Ruth's Chris if you'll answer my phone call. And the kid called me with the snap of a finger. And I was like, pay up, Rob.
I did. I gave you a gift card.
You did. You're right. You did.
This was nothing exotic, but it's funny to look back on how things have changed. And I actually thought about it because I saw him at the spring game. But Ramon Foster, golly, that would have been 2003.
I guess.
Maybe even 2002. But anyway, Ramon was up in the press box during the orange and white game. And I joked with him that I had written his commitment story. And it shows you how things have changed because it was just like a random Wednesday night. And I was calling to get an update, like, hey, Ramon, when's the last time you talked to Coach Fulmer? What's going on? He was like, I actually talked to him just a half hour ago. I just committed. And we were joking that, if that happened now, he'd be in the middle of Ripley High School gymnasium with, a conference table and 3 or 4 hats on it. And instead it was just like, I called him up and committed tonight. And shows you how things have changed in almost 2 decades.
Yep. I called David Leverton, got his commitment. Mark Bradley was in the house. As Tennessee's assistant coach, he committed to Bradley. I didn't know it. I just cold called David to see what was going on.
Same deal here.
And he answered. He goes, "Yeah, I just committed to Coach Bradley." He's sitting across the room from me in a chair. And then my other one was New Year's Eve, Ed Orgeron. I was at a restaurant in Gatlinburg and interviewed him on a dinner napkin and a pen from a waitress there.
Mrs. Hubbs loved that, didn't she?
She was really excited about that one because I had to go back and write it after we got done with dinner. So anyway, but back to the transfers. Obviously, Tennessee's got 3. Austin, how would you rate what Josh Heupel's been able to do in the transfer portal? What do you like about these 3? I mean, we've talked about Milton a lot, but the other 2 in particular, what do you like about what they've got done there?
Well, all positions of need, and that's the thing, Brent. I mean, defensive line, linebacker, and then of course, quarterback. All positions that that they need help, and so that's kind of the big thing to me. If you're going to go down that road, you've got to take guys, at positions you need bodies, need people that can help you, and they've done it to this point. Now they could use help in the secondary. And they probably, could use help at a lot of different positions where they're just real thin, but we'll see if they're able to get anything else between now and, let's say June or early July.
Yeah. And again, for those who, come up with this notion that you have to be in the portal by a certain date, May 1st or whatever that was out there, that's just not accurate. You can go in the portal whenever. Major Burns, by the way, who's transferring from Georgia, I certainly believe and expect that he is going to go back to Baton Rouge at LSU. In LSU, he's from Baton Rouge, so that one would make the most sense there. Even though a lot of people certainly like his skill and like what he is about. So we'll see what Tennessee can get done in the transfer portal moving forward.
Isn't it July 1, the deadline? I think, which I can promise you, Rick Barnes hates. I mean, that's and coaches across the country. I may be a little off on that, but I know it doesn't end until well into June, and I believe July 1 is the deadline. And to me, that's pretty unfair to college coaches. Now, I'm a big advocate for players being able to move and not sit out, but I don't think you need 75 days between the end of spring practice and the deadline to decide. I mean, I think coaches, I think, deserve to go into June, into what I call the official start of summer, knowing what the roster is going to look like next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly you got to, again, I think that's a change that they're going to have to make in regards to
I think they will make
portal. I mean, you just can't have guys in that situation where they've got all season long. They can go in the portal in the middle of the season, remain on the team. I mean, that's just hard roster management for a coach. And we'll see kind of what changes are made there. We'll see how kids adjust to the transfer portal after seeing what happens to some of those guys who have gone in the portal and probably are not getting some of the things that they were expecting to get in terms of offers and availabilities out there, and not getting the type of opportunities they thought they were going to get.
There's over 1,100 basketball players, Division I basketball players in the portal. I doubt that there are 1,100 roster spots.
No, there's absolutely not.
Talking about high school kids coming in, COVID guys coming back. Yeah, I mean, there's some guys who have made some bad decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, before we get to football recruiting, just while we're on the topic of transfers, anything new in the basketball world transfer?
Yeah, I don't have anything new. I mean, I wouldn't rule something out. I wouldn't rule out something happening, but right now, I don't get the impression that Tennessee is really far down the road with anybody. I know they're looking into some kids' situations, investigating some guys, why are they leaving? How would they fit in our culture? That type of thing. But as far as somebody that they're in deep with, I don't think that's the case right now. But let me stress, with the portal open for, more than another month, I wouldn't rule out something happening.
All right, Austin Price, you got the pleasure of touring the state of Tennessee with me and my little Toyota Corolla White Rocket. 1,075 miles in about 36 hours, 13 stops. We've started putting out some of those interviews, and we'll continue to have some of those things in the coming days. What was your takeaway? Not my driving, not my food selection.
How was Demas's, AP?
We didn't make it there.
We didn't go.
I'm telling you what, there was a lot of gas station food in that trip. I'm telling you that.
We ate like crap, Rob, and to the point where we even stopped instead of just coming home. We both wanted decent food, and we went to the Logan's Roadhouse in Cookeville just to have adequate food, because it was like Jacks and that type of trip. Like it was just
candy bars and bags of chips from the gas station. All right, Austin, what was your takeaway from just the kind of overall talk? I mean, we talked to 22s, 23s, 24s. What's your takeaway on the state of Tennessee and Tennessee right now?
Well, the Golden Flake chips are really, really hot. But that there's going to be a lot of kids in this state for the next several years, and Tennessee's making it a priority. We've seen that, Brent, just in the last 12 to 14 hours with them offering the kid at Mount Juliet, with them offering AC Mason Young at Covington. Again, you've got to approach these in-state kids like you do the kids that are 4 states over. I would continue to belabor that point, and this staff's doing it. I mean, let's give them some credit. They are out, ahead on several of these guys in state. And and when I say have some of these kids been offered by Eastern Kentucky and those type of schools? Yes, but from the Power 5 level, Tennessee's getting out ahead of most of them, and that's good to see because we heard that from several coaches that Tennessee as a program for the last 10 or 15 years has always been slow to offer, and they've waited and waited and waited until a player had 5 or 6 offers, and then you're playing catch up. And so this staff's trying to not do that. They've been very proactive in the 23s, and getting out there ahead of the game in a lot of areas. So I think Tennessee, they can still be major players for guys like Jalen Lewis and Anthony Brown, but at the same time, they've got to choose to go full steam ahead with those guys. And they started to do that with Lewis. I think we're starting to see a little bit more traction with Anthony Brown. Cam Miller, I think Tennessee sits in a really good spot there, barring, Alabama coming hard after him. I know the reaction to my interview with Dallin. Honestly, Dallin put out back-to-back days of Tennessee edits after we did that interview. And, I still would consider Ohio State the favorite there. But I've said for a while, I think it's Ohio State or Tennessee. Like, I think Notre Dame is a nice show pony that you put on the mantle, but I don't think he's going there. And Illinois is in it because Bielema has treated Chase like, one of the family. And that's made a huge impression on Dallin, that Brett Bielema has been so good to his big brother at both Arkansas and now at Illinois. So, for me, I look across the state, Tennessee's making it a priority, and you can tell. Does that mean they're going to land everybody? No, because you're never going to land everybody in state, but you got to land a majority of the ones you want. And I think they can still do that, over the next several months if they're given time.
Yeah, I think with those 23s and 24s too, you said this earlier when talking about taking transfers, those guys want to see some success on the field. I mean, and I'm not saying the 22s don't, but a lot of those 22s are going to be off the board before Tennessee ever snaps the football. In all likelihood, a good bulk of them are. Those 23s and 24s, though, if Tennessee can have some early success out of the gate and some individuals have success and that you get an idea of what their identity is going to be, I think that's important. And I think that's something that this staff probably looks at and why the transfer portal is so important for them. It's not just for wins, it's for the perception of where the program is moving and the direction it's moving to.
Yeah, I mean, right now they're selling a vision. The next 2 classes, they can sell film.
It's a great way to put it.
I'll say this, Brent. I look for little things like, how kids handle themselves. Sure, like their ability on the field matters, but like, what's their mental makeup like? Like Jalen Lewis, he walked in the room. He didn't wait on us to initiate with him. He came straight to us, shook our hands. Like little things like that, to me, like are impressive. The fact that Marquez Taylor at, a 23 over there at McKenzie High School, he looked us up on Twitter and then sent a nice tweet to us afterwards. Like, I thought that was nice. Anthony Brown, who's got a little bit of a lisp when he talks, rolled right through a 6-minute interview with you, was unaffected by it, confident, like that kind of stuff. Like that, other kids might have been bothered by that, but he wasn't. Like, I mean, like the mental makeup of things to me, for certain kids goes a long way in addition to what they can do physically on the field. So like, good group of kids, man. I don't know how you felt. I thought that Nathan Robinson was as imposing of a kid as we've seen on that trip to 2023 at Greenbrier. You and I both remarked, how good the Herring brothers looked. Yeah, Caleb, who's obviously going to be a highly ranked kid, but man, Elijah looks the part, dude. I'm telling you, I think you agree with me. Like Tennessee's going to look back and go, we made the right decision going hard after Elijah Herring.
Yeah, I thought he looked fantastic, and I'm with you. I mean, kids are more polished today. I think kids are more understanding of their brand. I think that's something that is talked about. But when you go into these smaller towns and do these things, you kind of wonder how those guys are going to be. Some of those guys had never really done interviews before, and really really impressed with how those kids were. And the high school football in the state of Tennessee is in a good spot because it's consistently getting better. Better athletes, better coaching. There's not this cycle up for one grade class and then boom, there's a big drop off. I mean, there may be a class a little bit better than the next class, but there's not that big downfall like we saw 15, 17 years ago when we were covering this thing.
Yeah, it's an enormous difference. And I mean, not only in just the talent, but this is off tangent and doesn't have anything to do with what happens on the field, but I run into less and less kids that are just a pain in the butt to deal with. I mean, remarkably less. I mean, I can't even remember the last kid basketball or football wise I dealt with. Is like, man, I would pay $50 not to make that phone call again. I mean, I don't know what the explanation is. I mean, I think maybe what you said, they're aware of the brand. I think maybe guys who are going to have the opportunities that these kids have get identified earlier and get into programs, whether that's 7-on-7 stuff or like Buck and NPA, where they're just around mentors who kind of broaden their horizons a little bit. But I think that's an interesting point you just brought up about how polished kids are and how maybe appreciative, assertive, confident they are. Because I mean, and I'm looking at you, Jamarcus Russell.
Well, for all the talk about like the we like written stories versus we like the videos, that goes on our site. I want to tell you right now, the coaches love the videos because they get to see what a kid's like in that setting, to see how they handle themselves, to see how tall they are. I don't know how many times I get a phone call. How tall are you? How tall is Brent? Because I mean, they're trying to figure. So Brent's a legit 6'1". Oh, look now, I mean, like
filled out. He's still filling out though, I think.
So I mean, like they get to see, and honestly, as I told Dallin Hayden this tonight, where you have come doing an interview on camera in the last 3 years is remarkable, and how much that helps you when you go to college. I don't think the kids truly understand, because they walk in the door and they understand looking at the camera, answering in complete sentences, talking, and it's just different than when you have a recorder stuck in your face.
Well, and I think they also get coached up so much by their high school coaches about what they're putting out there on social media. How every college coach that's recruiting you is looking at your social media profile. What's your tweet history? What do you put on Instagram? I just there's a lot of negatives about social media. I think we can all agree. But I think it's also made kids a lot savvier about how they present themselves.
Well, I'll say this, and I know we're running out of time. I remarked the Hubs when we made the drive from Jackson down to Selmer and across over to Hardin County. It really gives you a greater appreciation for John Ward, who taught me about Humboldt, Tennessee, and about Mumford, Tennessee, and about these little small towns that Tennessee's actually recruiting in again. McKenzie, there's a kid at Ripley. You mentioned Ripley earlier, Rob, that Tennessee is evaluating in the 22 class. Is he someone they'll take?
Milan, Tennessee.
Milan, Tennessee. You really start going down, some of these little West Tennessee towns, and it was just neat. I had a blast. We were in the White Rocket. Hubs was going a million mile an hour. I was without my Apple CarPlay, which is just a drag back, and the decades of technology. But I mean, like it was a good time outside of the fact that we literally did eat Golden Flake barbecue potato chips, multiple times on the trip.
All that was missing was the flux capacitor, right, AP? Since we didn't have Apple Play. I'll say this: I've never made the drive east of Jackson, Tennessee, to Memphis without being on the interstate. And we got off the interstate before you got to Jackson and went up to Henry County, up to Paris, Tennessee, and didn't see the interstate again until we were in Memphis.
Wow, I didn't even know you could. I didn't know you could do that.
And saw 7 kids in the process of making that drive. I think, AP,
yeah,
like that. So it was a lot of fun.
And then made that drive from Hardin County, which I thought was going to be just straight back roads, but it was really nice 4-lane state highways all the way back to 65 and then up around 840 back to Murfreesboro.
I will argue that there probably is when you get into Arkansas or maybe some of the North Dakota, South Dakota, Nashville to Jackson, desolate drive.
It was pretty interesting off the interstate.
I believe that. But if you're just on 40, it's a desolate drive.
That's why there was no hotel rooms in Jackson.
I'm gonna tell you right. I'm gonna tell you right now what I told Brent. Rob, had you been on that trip, Roscoe P. Coltrane would have arrested you 44 times for speeding through those small West Tennessee towns. There's no way we'd have been running we'd look like Burt Reynolds and Smokey and the Bandit running from Buford T. Justice out in West Tennessee had you been on the drive.
We've got 48 hours to talk to 21 recruits and drive from Knoxville and get to Memphis and get back with the tape.
Yep, we did it in 36. So we made pretty good time. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. Hope everybody enjoyed it and hope you guys have a great Tuesday. We'll talk to you soon.